Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the briefing session at the City of Vincent of the 15th of June 2021. For those of you who I have not met, my name's Susan Gontaszewski and I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Vincent. I declare the briefing open at 6:01 and would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. No surprises, but Mayor Cole is an apology this evening, so I will be the presiding officer in her absence. We also have Councillor Smith attending via Zoom. Yes, on audio only. Otherwise, we are all present and accounted for. We will move on to public question time and the receiving of public statements. Everybody gets up to 3 minutes. We ask that you come up to the lectern, state your full name and the suburb in which you reside and the item to which you are speaking about this evening. We do ask that people keep to time, and the CEO has a timer and will let you know when your time is up. We've had an approved request for deputation or an extended speaking time from Lara Lukic. So when that comes up, you have up to 6 minutes speaking time. There's no set order. We do live stream our question time, public statement time. So if you do not wish to be on the live stream, if you could please let me know and we can make arrangements for that. I think that's about it. Can I have the first speaker, please? Go for it.
Good evening, my name's Andrew. I reside in North Perth. I'm wanting to just mention about the calming measures in the traffic calming measures in the proposed in North Perth. I live in Camellia Street between Vincent Street and Claverton Street. And I do have a petition which I've submitted and will be presented next week at the meeting. I did ring my councillor wardens this morning and got a reply from one, which thank you, Joshua. Basically, most people on the street have signed the petition opposing at least the calming measures in Camellia Street, the proposed chicane and the detriment that it would bring, namely the loss of parking bays in particular, which is a greater opportunity cost to the people in the street than the benefits of the chicane or other. There is another calming measure proposed, but everybody is of the opinion that the loss of parking space as to the status quo is a greater opportunity cost. That is the main key. When it's a short street, it's on a slope. There's been no problems with that street up until now, and most people have signed the petition and are not in favour of it. And also expanding on that, there is the tendency to have the reverse effect of the intended desire, which is people, more so young people, treat chicanes as a racetrack. So they see how fast they can go through them. And so you end up getting a worsening of the suggested speeding that takes place, which is not apparent by the resident of the street. So that's they were the two main points in relation to opposing it by the people in the street. The last one was that the use of the money could be used much better. I think I can't recall, I think Andrew was the engineer, the proposed $50,000 put aside for these calming measures. There are better uses for that money. In particular, the playground along Leach Street. They have done, the new surface and a wooden gate as opposed to the steel one that was replaced recently. But I mean, if you look at the playground, it is very tired looking, and the actual core of that would be much better spent money and to make it family friendly. So I'd like you to take that into consideration tonight and next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next speaker, please.
Dudley Meyer Highgate. I would like to speak on 6.2, the commercial waste. It would take too long for me to go through all the statements in this report and other statements that have been made previously that misrepresent and misunderstand the businesses in Vincent. I spoke to over 80 businesses and the majority would produce less waste than a normal residence, but you wouldn't understand that if you read these reports. I'll just mention 4 issues. The first one's about engagement. Staff have said that they've had face-to-face visits with the businesses. So I asked a few of the businesses that I had contact details for, and the responses were, seemed like a interested uni student, couldn't answer my questions. The second was, marked bins and left a flyer on the bins, didn't talk to anybody. Third one was, just told the staff that collections would finish by July and they wanted to put stickers on the bins. And the fourth one was, we're just interested in putting stickers on the bins. This is reinforced by the fact that the most common question I received was, why are they doing it? Very few businesses know about the proposed micro-business alternative. There's no real publicity other than if you stumble across it on the website and there's not much information. Also, you shouldn't assume that businesses have generally been engaged properly. Another example is the last meeting, there were 4 people in the audience. Someone came and took their contact details so they could be contacted. None of them were contacted except for one, Jocelyn, and that's because she initiated contact after waiting nearly 3 weeks. The second issue is about misunderstanding business. The city doesn't appreciate the number of small businesses. They say that in the report, the vast majority need a tailored service. Yet earlier they said they didn't have details and they had no database. So what is it? You know what the business profile is or you don't know. And the press release that the Mayor came out had a quote from a business who's a large business who's never dealt with Vincent for waste. And it's putting all businesses in that same basket. What you should do is speak to those small businesses like the accounting firms, the lawyers, the design studios. They're completely different. Claims about the environmental benefit. There's a claim that going to a contractor is going to be better for the environment because of the incentives to reduce landfill. It's not true. I've seen one business, and I've got a photo, where they've moved from a large number of waste bins and recycling bins and now have one skip. So all the waste, the organics and recycling go into the same skip. So it's bye-bye to recycling and bye-bye to FOGO. Cost. The staff say the micro business service will be on a full recovery basis, and also it would be the same as the residential service. They're proposing a charge of $699 plus an $80 administration fee. Yet in March 2019, the staff said the current system costs $336.99 for residential and commercial. So it's gone up significantly. I think $699 is a rip-off. Remind you that Bayswater has a FOGO service for businesses and residents. They charge $338 this year for services. So I think it is a rip-off. If you looked at the cost, the $699, and charge that to the 17,031 residential properties, the total cost would be $10 million. That's obviously wrong. It's 3 times the amount. So that $699 cannot be justified. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dudley. Next speaker, please. Yep, thank you.
Good evening. Good evening to all. My name is Lara Lukic. This is my brother, Tom. We're here to talk to you about item 5.1 on the council briefing agenda, which is the premises located at 290 Beaufort Street in Perth. Many of you will know Tom from his time at Tom's on Oxford Street in Leederville, where he owned and operated a gourmet delicatessen for more than 25 years. As a result of COVID and unsuccessful negotiations with the landlord, we ended up closing that business at about this time last year. However, since then, we have been fortunate enough to purchase a heritage listed building located at 290 Beaufort Street in Perth. Our intention is to create a licensed delicatessen, which would in effect be a fusion of an espresso bar, grocer, gourmet delicatessen and small bar. We have received approval from the city in respect of the shop and the cafe component of the business. We're here tonight to seeking consideration from you for the small bar component. There have been 50 submissions in respect of the proposal, with only one objection. We feel that this illustrates very clearly that there is a strong demand for activation of that part of Beaufort Street in Perth. We are shortly to commence works on the building and the heritage restoration of it, with more works to come over the next 3-4 months in respect of the fit out. We would like to thank the officers for their recommendation, for their proposed recommendation for approval. We consent to the conditions and we hope that the council can support our application. We are both here tonight, in effect, to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. A briefing session is for elected members to ask questions of administration. Right. So thank you very much for your presentation, but we don't, if we have any questions, what will happen is the councillors will ask administration and administration will either be able to answer them, or if there's additional information that council is required to make their decision, administration will go away and gather that information over the next week. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. Do we have anything further from any other? No? Okay, I will close the questions from the gallery, and I believe we have one written question, Executive Manager of Strategy and Governance.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have one question from Anna Biriak from Perth. I own a 1-bedroom, 1-car park apartment within the city of Vincent. The car park for my apartment is on a separate title, which means I'm required to pay 2 sets of council rates, one for the car park and one for the apartment. In total, I pay $2,685 per annum, while larger apartments with multiple car parks in the same complex are charged $1,700, a difference of almost $1,000. I believe this is grossly unfair, and I would like to see the council correct this anomaly. My suggestion to the council is to introduce an additional lower minimum rate for properties where the purpose is solely for residential car parking and/or storage. The lower rate would acknowledge that car parks and storage facilities are not vacant land which can be developed, and are in fact developed uninhabitable land, and therefore do not benefit from many council services such as waste collection. The criteria of this category could be based on land use as suggested above, or on land size. Many councils in Victoria and New South Wales have policies and procedures in place to deal with similar situations, and I appreciate the council may have an alternative idea on how to address this anomaly. Would the council please be able to make a difference and implement a more equitable rating structure?
Thank you. I'll now move to item 4 on the agenda, declarations of interest. CEO, I believe we have 2 declarations.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. The first is from Councillor Toppelberg in relation to item 6.2, commercial waste response to petition. Councillor Toppelberg notes that he operates a business which will be directly affected by the proposed changes. It is a financial interest and he is not seeking approval to participate in the debate or to remain in chambers or vote on the matter. The second is from Councillor Loden in relation to item 7.2, which is the management agreement for the Vincent Tool Library, noting that Councillor Loden's mother is a member of the Tool Library and other members of the Tool Library supported Councillor Loden's election campaign. That's all, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now move on to we'll do some questions on item 6.2 in relation to commercial waste. Councillor Toppelberg will be leaving the chamber for this item. Item 6.2 is the Waste Strategy Project 8, Commercial Waste Collection Progress Update and Response to Petitions. Can I have some questions? Councillor Hallett.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question in terms of the comment from the public gallery around the calculation of the fees associated with commercial waste. If the Director can comment on how they were calculated, benchmarking against other councils, etc.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Habit. Yeah, they're calculated using the charges that we've been levying on non-rateable properties for the last few years, and also benchmarking against other councils. I mean, I note the comment from the public gallery about Bayswater being quite a low cost, but there are plenty of other councils that charge more than that. So we did a bit of benchmarking as well to arrive at that figure.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of queries around some of the numbers here. And we have received an email, but just for the benefit of the public as well. Would you be able to give us some details on the number of businesses there are that are impacted by this, as well as how many of those businesses don't actually get or you didn't get a commercial service prior to this change? And I also understand that a number of businesses have already opted out, so we know how many are left, and then of those remaining, how many would potentially be able to access the micro business opportunity?
Yeah, so you Deputy Mayor, that information is all in an email that I'll need to find, or I can take the question on notice if that's okay.
Any further questions?
And so I guess one further question is, when we look back at the original council decision was to discontinue the commercial waste service by having the micro business option. Is that effectively similar to the limited charge service option that was originally presented at the time? So you can have any kind of commercial waste selection you want as long as it's black sort of thing, as long as it looks exactly like the residential service?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. So there was an option originally presented to council to run a small-scale commercial service, but that was not an option that was selected. What we said subsequent to the decision is that we could accommodate a small number of small businesses, but exactly what you said is true, which is on the basis that they could accommodate a residential service. They were on the residential rounds. So in other words, typically commercial premises get more bins than that. They get more frequent collections. You know, we're saying that we couldn't accommodate that in the new residential service, particularly with the switch to FOGO. Remembering that the rubbish bin will go to it's currently 240 litres. It'll go to a 140 litre bin, and that will be collected once a fortnight. So that's quite a big change for commercial premises.
And if a business wants to take this up, they can access all that information through the website, and it's available for them to do that?
Through Well, there is information on the website, and we encourage people to call, because through the conversation, I think some of the commercial businesses don't realise that. For example, the bin's going to be small and collected once a fortnight. Some of them assume that it'll be free of charge, which it isn't. It's beyond their commercial rates. So we encourage people to call us, have that conversation so we can explain, and that's working quite well. We had to have a small number of businesses interested in the service, but not that many.
And if there was a large number of businesses to take this up, because one of the benefits of this has been the reduction of not needing one truck, is there a tipping point where all of a sudden, if 50% of the businesses wanted a once a week service, or fortnightly service for rubbish, fortnightly for recycling, that this would tip us over into needing an additional truck?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, there definitely is a point at which we might tip over, and we are conscious of that. That's why we said the service is discretionary. Doesn't mean that everybody who wants the service and could accommodate it, that we could accommodate, because it would be a tipping point. But we're nowhere near that tipping point at the moment where we're concerned about that, based on the interest that's come from the business community.
My last question, just around how we're supporting business. So we've got our phone number, and we've got a number of calls from businesses trying to seek support in finding a provider for their commercial service. I guess the criticisms that I've received from people has been that we effectively tell them that we can't recommend a provider and encourage them to do a search for commercial waste on Google. Is there any reason why we can't provide more specific information to people?
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor, we've struggled with this one. We originally on the website put a link to WALGA preferred suppliers. So those are people that have passed the sort of WALGA test and are active in the area. But we had complaints from businesses that weren't part of the WALGA panel. So we then changed it to consult the Yellow Pages or Google, because you get all the information and typically people do that. We felt that wasn't enough, so I believe it's now been changed. We've actually named the 4 major suppliers that are active in the area and then said, but you can also look at the Yellow Pages and Google. We won't recommend anyone, but we will advise people, if they want to contact us, we'll advise them of the names of companies that are active, but we are very careful about not recommending anyone.
And I guess the crux of the issue that the petition speaks to is, and the concern it flags is around that people, they want us to continue the commercial service, but the second part of it is that people are not going to be ready for this transition to occur. And it kind of gets caught in this, how do we get comfort, or what comfort can you give us that of the, I think it's roughly about 80% of businesses that we don't know what they're doing yet, that when we take the bins away, that we're not going to find a whole heap of rubbish sort of sitting on the roadside waiting to be collected by trucks that don't show up.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. So we wrote a letter to all commercial ratepayers 9 months ago when the decision was made. We've now visited every single premises, talked to the actual people in the premises, because we recognise the fact that some of the ratepayers are not, they're landlords effectively. So we've actually visited everyone. It's true what was said in the public gallery. They've all been given a flyer. We'll help as much as we can. It's not difficult to get a commercial service. It's just a case of making a few phone calls. It is a very competitive market, so we're not really concerned that people can't find the service, and we'll give them all the help they need, that we can for them to find that service. The final thing is that a second letter is going this week, which just reminds people that the service is ending and actually gives specific weeks when the bins in their area will be removed. So that's a further reminder. So, we're confident we've done everything we can to inform people, and what we see and when we see people is they're making the transition. I'm sorry I couldn't find the data earlier, but remember that a lot of the businesses already use commercial providers, so they were taking our allowance and then topping up with a commercial provider. So a lot of them have just made arrangements with that commercial provider to provide a couple of extra bins if that's what they need. So a lot of them are not, it's not alien to them, the commercial market. They're already doing that for top-up services. So we are reasonably comfortable that things will go okay when we start removing the bins.
Any further questions? Executive Director, I guess I just wanted to, further touch on the micro-business alternative and the promotion of that to small businesses. Obviously, the city had started its rounds with businesses to get through all of the businesses in the city. I note that the micro-business alternative was flagged some time ago and has, been surfaced to the public, but I'm still a bit unsure as to what level of knowledge there is within the existing business population on this alternative. And so I'm just wondering, of those conversations that have been had with businesses, when was the micro-business alternative started to be raised, and how confident are we that those conversations included that alternative where appropriate?
Yes, Deputy Mayor. So the conversation started as soon as we were doing the visits, which was post-Christmas from memory. I think it's in the report. We were telling people that there was a micro-business service being developed and what the bins would look like. The only thing that was missing was the fee, which is in the fees and charges to be approved. So we're now telling people what the proposed fees and charges are, and we're telling them it's subject to council approval, because that was part of the budget process back in February, March when we were visiting people. We would just say it was a charge service, but we couldn't confirm what the charge would be. So that's the final piece of the jigsaw. So definitely from the very first visit, that that information has been made available.
And Mr. Myers raised the issue that early on when the fee that the service was, or the micro service was talked about, the estimated fee was considerably lower than what's come forward. Is there any comment in relation to that?
Yes, through Deputy Mayor. As I said, the fee was worked on. We've been servicing non-rateable properties for quite some time, and the fee was based on that. So that was based on historical data, and we've just worked that up into a micro business fee. We have added an administration charge because there will be a visit required, an assessment, a discussion, and there'll be separate invoicing for those services. So there is additional cost over what a normal householder service would cost. And the final thing is we anticipate that it will require a managing, because typically there's more contamination with commercial bins than there is with domestic. So that's the reason for the administration charge. It's all wrapped up in that one single $80, I think.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further? Okay. We will now move on to item 5.1, 290 Beaufort Street, Perth, change of use to restaurant, cafe and shop. Could we grab Councillor Toppelberg from wherever he's residing at the moment? So change of use to restaurant, cafe, shop and small bar, including alterations, additions and signage. Amendment to current approved. Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the officers. Just got a question on the hours of operation, and just I suppose trying to be consistent with other previous decisions that council have made with other nearby small bars, with some understanding on the hours that were recommended. I'm specifically looking at some understanding while we haven't included some of those other provisions for midnight closure on Sunday, where it's followed by a public holiday, as we've done with other previous approvals, and whether administration would be supportive of those were an amendment to be put forward.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that was a consideration in the course of the assessment. Ultimately, the applicant was seeking specific hours of operation. Those were the hours that were advertised as part of the application. The hours sought, specifically to the small bar use, is consistent with the city's licensed premises policy, aside from Friday and Saturday nights, which extend beyond the 10 p.m. as prescribed in the licensed premises policy. It extends to midnight. So ultimately, we assess what was before us. Now, I do appreciate that in other circumstances, between administration and council, we have supported extending the operating hours on a Sunday where it is followed with a public holiday on the Monday. So I do acknowledge that. Given the current circumstances and given that we advertised it with certain hours being operated, and directly next door to this property is a mixed use development, so there are some sensitive uses there. We were conscious that in terms of a reasonable approach, that they didn't have, the residents that is, didn't have the benefit to comment on extended operating hours. So we thought that was inappropriate to impose subsequent to the advertising period. So given that the applicant is supportive of the conditions and the operating hours sought, we do think that that is a reasonable term of the approval.
Thank you. So just an understanding that should the applicant wish to amend that in the future, it's quite a simple process moving forward.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, that would require an amendment to the application.
Just also want an understanding on the building. Is it registered on the State Heritage Register or just on our local municipal register?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the latter, it's management category B.
Does that still render the owners eligible for some of the available grants? Is that something the city could assist the owner with?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll take that on notice and review the terms of the grant and provide that in the briefing notes.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Am I correct that under the current provisions, sorry, the question that was asked before was whether it was a simple process to make an amendment to the hours of operation, and the answer was yes, there would be an amendment to the application. Just for clarity, that means it would be a development application, an advertising period, and require a decision of council. So it'll likely be a full 90-day process. Is that correct?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to answer your question, yes, that would ultimately be the process. There's also another item on tonight's agenda around delegations. This does relate to a heritage property, and so there may be some implications from that regard as well. So yes, an application will be required.
Okay, and I'll ask in the delegations about small bars as well, but and I understand what the applicant applied for, but in the event that this opens and operates as intended, are we saying that if someone was to buy cheese at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening and they want to have a glass of wine with it, they'd be told, no, sorry, you can't do that because the liquor license finish or the ability to operate as a small bar finishes at 6 o'clock on a Monday or Tuesday? Is that correct? So given my understanding of what is intended to be for the operation is that it'll be a mix of, the shop component or the component, I guess the small bar component closing at 6 p.m. Is the cafe hours the same that have currently been approved? Does that also close at 6 p.m. on a Monday and Tuesday?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, in terms of the current operating hours for the shop and restaurant cafe, that is unrestricted in terms of operating hours. Under our licensed premises policy, there are no limitations.
So presumably, okay, so but the small bar section would actually close physically at 6 p.m. Is that the intent? Does it mean that the area can still be used as a cafe, not restaurant, but can that area be used to serve food with alcohol?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, the latter. It still can be served, it still can be used and food can still be served with alcohol.
So I know it's getting into the nitty gritty, but if I'm standing there with somebody and I'm having a drink and I want to have another one after 6 o'clock and I'm not sitting down and eating, under this provision, it's the people who are sitting down and eating can continue to order food and drink, but I can't order another drink after 6 o'clock under the proposed current conditions?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that would be the case. That's what the applicant is seeking approval for.
Okay, so I might seek some clarity between now and next week, even though I'm not here, but I think I understand the issues of what's been advertised and what's next door, but I think some of those issues arising may not have been clear for the applicant in that circumstance. Perhaps yes. The other question was about the occupancy. So the 70-person restriction, is that based on building occupancy capacity or the applicant's request? So can the building physically, for the size of the building, can it take more patrons than that, or is the 70 the limit? Or was that just the request for the number?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I will liaise with my colleagues in regards to public building capacity. My understanding is that the venue, given that there's 2 exits, it's capable of accommodating more patrons. But in terms of the number sought, yes, that's relating to the intensity sought by the applicant in terms of patrons.
Can I just ask, and perhaps before the briefing notes are issued, that liaise with the applicant and confirm whether, whilst that might be their intent, that they understand that it would be a full DA. Again, if they wanted to increase that, they may not wish to for reasons but just to make sure the applicant understands that the desire to have a place for 70 people, if you want to have 90 people, there requires a full application again, or up to 120, which is a small bar licence, based on the building capacity, just to confirm that what's there is actually what they are seeking for the premises long term and providing for potential growth if the business is successful.
Any further questions? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just noted, there's no alfresco proposed for this business, from what I can tell from the plans. If What would be required if they did want al fresco, for example, along Brisbane Street adjacent to the existing or the neighbouring residential properties?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that would require a separate permit to be obtained, outdoor eating area permit, and there's a number of terms and conditions that need to be satisfied to make sure it's safe in use and there's adequate clearance for pedestrians to still pass and such. But that is separate to the planning approval process.
I might just ask in relation to the licensed premises policy. So my understanding is that the Monday and Tuesday to 6 p.m, even though the licensed premises policy says 10 p.m, the 6 p.m has been in line with the applicant, what they've requested. Yep.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
And just so could I just get clarification? I'm quite happy with this. In the briefing notes as to when the licensed premises policy is scheduled to be reviewed, I note that it is has not been reviewed, I think, for 4 years or so. So I'm presuming it's as part of our schedule. That would be lovely. I think I don't have anything further. Nothing further on this item. Councillor Topelberg.
So just one further. The current approval, which was done under delegation, did that include noise assessment?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, acoustic assessment was undertaken. Acoustic report was submitted as well. Ultimately, that forms the terms of the current approval, which is attached to this report, and it requires the venue to be operated in accordance with the recommendations of that acoustic report.
Okay, and just further to Councillor Wallace's question about al fresco, did the acoustic report contemplate al fresco at all? Did it deal with noise from adjacent to the building in the event that al fresco was sought? So, okay.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, sorry, I was shaking my head while you were speaking, but no, it didn't. It contemplated the premises as proposed with all of the activity occurring within the building.
Oh, and I just wanted to clarify, in the previous approval, the parking was waived without cash in lieu, and that was on the basis of 70 persons. So if there was any further intensification of usage, the parking calculation would have to be revisited. I'm getting a nod, so thank you for that. Okay, if there's nothing further, we will move on to item 7.7, which I will get the formal wording, which is this year's adoption of the annual budget 2021-2022. I believe we have a presentation on this item. Who's running that is the Executive Director of Community and Business Services.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just kick off the presentation. We'll make it as brief as possible. I think Wendy was going to share screen. Oh, actually, the Executive Director is going to share screen onto Zoom. The presentation slides. And as usual, it's quite an exhaustive process for council administration to prepare the budget each year. It starts at the administration level at the end of each calendar year, where the finance team go out to all the line areas to seek updates and input into that budget process. The difference this year being that we, given the uncertainty and difficulty around budgeting last year due to COVID, we had quarterly budget updates, which helped us track our expenditure and revenue and make adjustments as we needed to throughout the financial year. Just as background to the budget setting this year, and in comparison to, I guess, the worst case scenario and negative sentiment, we were in the middle of 12 months ago. The WA economy and the Australian economy as a whole has been performing really well and has bounced back to a large extent, WA in particular in terms of state final demand, retail, strong movement in the property sector as well. The next slide also speaks to this in terms of the employment levels are tracking very well throughout WA, and the level of job vacancies have increased and employment levels are very strong, even compared to pre-COVID. And in particular relevance to our planning and building team, private building approvals are on the way up, and there's been a very big increase in housing commencements as well within WA and Perth in particular. This will put some pressure on our general costs as a local government, and we're starting to see those cost pressures now, including through the information we get from WALGA around the local government cost index and some of the results of the tendering and contracting that local governments are undertaking at the moment. The budget themes that we prepared in consultation with Council as we, over the last 6 months, including very regular, sometimes 2 budget workshops a month for the last 6 months, is that we are expecting a return to essentially pre-COVID levels of operation. We forecast a return of our pre-COVID revenue, and we're tracking that at 95% for next year's budget. We put a big effort over the last 12 months into our Vincent rebound plan, which we've been presenting quarterly updates to Council on, and there's another on the agenda tonight, as well as providing financial hardship provisions for ratepayers. The take-up of that wasn't as high as we were fearing that it may have been, which hopefully reflects that across the board our economy and our residents have been faring well over the last 12 months. A big focus for our service delivery review has already been flagged tonight, which is essentially a complete overhaul of our waste service, which includes an additional 3rd bin with the FOGO rollout in October to every household, ceasing our commercial waste service, as well as starting a trial of the Verge Valet bulk waste on-demand collection in the new year. Over the last 2 years and the last 12 months in particular, we've been having a whole of administration, whole of council effort on asset management, and that has been reflected in the development of a draft asset management and sustainability strategy, and trying to increase our level of capital expenditure on our assets, particularly the renewal and maintenance costs for parks, reserves, buildings and roads. We're also consulting on a new community engagement framework, which will be a focus for next year, particularly as we are flagging and forecasting a big increase in our capital works budget with some big projects, some of which will be talked about later tonight, particularly around our parks and reserves. We're looking at works and planning around Robinson Park, Axford Park, Woodville Reserve, Banks Reserve, and Britannia Reserve, with a project on the cards for discussion tonight around Litter Stadium and Britannia. We'll continue our focus on enhancing our customer service and support and remaining as open, transparent and accountable as any local government in Western Australia. The revenue outlook for next financial year, I've mentioned we have adjusted our forecasts to have 95% revenue for Beady Park and car parking compared to pre-COVID levels. We've only proposed modest increases to fees and charges, maintaining financial hardship support as well. There has been some discussion with Council, including another item tonight about potential land sales. We had flagged potentially the sale of the car park at 25 Sydney Street earlier this year. We don't have a Council decision on that at this stage, but we are flagging potential revenue from some land sales next financial year. And there has been a forecast big increase in capital grants, particularly from the federal government. $6.7 million of those capital grants relates to hopefully securing $3 million from the federal government for upgrades at Litter Stadium. On the expenditure side, we're assuming a return to normal operations as compared to our COVID-affected year last financial year, but particularly a large increase in the capital works program, reflecting the forecasts for securing large grant funds for particular projects, and also expenses that were frozen or deferred last year are being reinstated. And I'll hand over to the Executive Director to take Council through the high-level rating strategy.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, or Deputy Mayor, I should say, sorry, Lord Mayor. So just to pick up from that and to conclude, the current financial statements that you have in front of you reflect a 2.4% increase in residential rates. About 1/3 of our residential properties sit on the minimum residential rate, which is $1,241, and that reflects a $29 a year increase for those ratepayers, or 56 cents per week. For an average home size with a gross rental value of $17,160, there would be an increase per year of $32, beg your pardon, and 62 cents per week. With commercial and industrial ratepayers, for the second year running, it is proposed that there will be a zero rate increase. And in addition to that, a once-off rebate of $520, which is a recognition of the fact that the city is removing commercial waste collection and that service has previously been cross-subsidised by residential ratepayers. In lieu of a 2.4% rate increase as the residential ratepayer has, that would average about $115 per year for commercial ratepayers, in addition to the $520 rebate. And just to conclude, there is a lot of activity occurring this year in the capital works. The CEO has just mentioned that we have a large number of capital grants that have come through, and as part of economic recovery planning, we have a $22 million capital works program planned, and 76% of that relates to asset renewals, which reflects our sustainability strategy. Couple of capital projects of note. We are spending planning to spend $370,000 on public art in our town centres. The CEO's mentioned that there is a $3 million grant towards improving Litter Stadium. Beady Park Leisure Centre is the benefit of $2.1 million in grants and works that will refurbish the indoor pool, fix the pool filtration systems, build a new kids' water playground, universal access toilets and change rooms inside, and also waterproof the historic grandstand. And that final piece itself is worth about $500,000. Menzies Park Pavilion is being refurbished for $330,000. As you can see there, it's looking a little bit sad. We've mentioned our FOGO program of $1.4 million, introducing our third bin and improving how we recycle collectively as a community. North Perth Town Hall, both sides of the town hall, 2 sets of kitchens, 2 sets of bathrooms will be upgraded. And we have $7.8 million in a variety of projects relating to roads, footpaths, parks and playgrounds. So in conclusion, that leaves us with an annual budget surplus of $61,624. And finally, for those ratepayers who are still experiencing hardship either due to COVID or just general life conditions, there are a number of different options. So in addition to rate smoothing, which is available to all ratepayers, we have a number of hardship programs available, and that includes deferrals of payments, flexible payment plans, suspension of debt recovery if you're involved in a payment plan process, and waiving of interest and fees if you're part of that process. And finally, for those who are struggling, there is the option of a hardship fund that can be applied, and the city has set aside $100,000 to fund that. And that's all. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have any questions on this item? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question about the question that was raised by email in relation to minimum rating. Just wondering if you could advise what options the city might have in that situation and whether that's a common occurrence.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. Unfortunately for the ratepayer who sent through the email, the situation is not a common one across the city. And it's a situation where the developer has created, they have sold a one-bedroom property, and then they have associated with that a separate title which relates to a car park. And at the time of the purchase, the ratepayer has effectively bought two properties. It would have been declared to them at that time of purchase by the real estate agent that there were two sets of rates applying. And unfortunately, with our policy, which I have to say is common to local government across Western Australia, that then means that there is a minimum rate that applies to both of those properties. So that has been explained to the ratepayer. It is obviously council's discretion as to where that minimum rate sits and how that is applied. But unfortunately, in this situation, this ratepayer is paying two sets of minimum rates because of how the property has been set up by the developer in the early stages.
Thank you. And it's my understanding, if you could just confirm that the ratepayer has been advised that one solution to this would be to apply to have those titles combined?
Yes, correct. So there's I'm not sure of the exact number, but there are a number of car parks that in this development that are treated similarly. The town planning team have previously advised that set of ratepayers that they could potentially form a body corporate and create a single title, is my understanding. I'm not an expert in that space. And that is certainly one option that they'd be encouraged to consider. The other situation is that the ratepayer could obviously rent out that car park and then revert to a residential parking permit in the area, or even sell and divest that particular part of the property if they don't wish to pay the minimum rate on it.
Councillor Loden.
On that specific topic, there was the question raised about the councils over East having a separate minimum rate. Is that something that is possible for us to do if we were so inclined?
I'm happy to look into that. When I have discussed that with the rates team, their concern was about making sure that the categorisation was very clear and that we understood how and when that would apply. And when I had an earlier conversation on this example, they were concerned that they couldn't define the category to a specific enough degree that it could apply just to the property group that we were discussing. And I suppose that's the reason why we haven't necessarily recommended something to that effect this time around. There could actually be unintended flow-on or consequences to categories of properties that we hadn't intended it to apply to. So it's a change that I'd make very cautiously.
Anything further? Executive Director, can I just get you to clarify for me the for the average GRV rated property, what the increase in the rate in the increase in weekly rates would be on the basis of this budget? Just going back to your presentation.
For a residential ratepayer, so if they're on the average GRV, then it would be an increase of $32 and 62 cents a week. I think I might have thrown some thousands in there last time when I was speaking.
So thank you. And for 1/3 of the properties in the city that are on the minimum rate, the increase is?
So for those 1/3 who are on the minimum rate, the increase is $29 per year or 56 cents a week.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just seeing if Councillor Smith has any further questions.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we'll circulate this presentation to council members now as well for further feedback and comment for next week.
Thank you. So sorry, just wanted to check. And in relation to the increase in employee costs in this year's budget, I'm just wanting to flag on behalf of Mayor Cole an amendment in relation to amend the increase in the increase in staffing. I'm just trying to. Sorry, I'm having some issues with Docs on Tap. Funnily enough. I just wanted to talk a little bit in relation to the change in employee profile within the city that's being proposed as part of this budget. And if you could provide some additional commentary on that in relation to the increase that has been raised both by the submitter but also by Mayor Cole in relation to the potential amendment.
Yes, so I'm just trying to find the document myself.
I think if Wendy could share screen the item, I think it's page 8 of item 7.7. Wendy, where we've got the table and the chart on employee costs. Not the presentation, the actual agenda item. It's page 8 of the annual budget item.
So perhaps while that's coming up, I'll just speak from memory. So I suppose one of the things that we notice in the proposed budget is a return to normal operating conditions, which means that we are now going to be applying the 1.5% EBA increase, 0.5% superannuation increase, and that we're going to, thank you, yeah, we can just leave it there. We'll be reinstating casual workers and vacant positions. So we went through a fairly rigorous budget cutting process last year in order to balance the budget. If you could just move down a little bit. A bit further, thanks. So part of the conversation that the Deputy Mayor just mentioned is that there is a proposal to add one additional resource of about $90,000 to support the Accessible City strategy. That is consistent with the city's long-term financial plan to have one additional FTE. And there is also an additional 50% of a resource to improve our graffiti removal for 1 year. A number of other roles are proposed to be added to the structure, but they are effectively paid for or offset through savings or increases in revenue. So therefore the net change in terms of our financial position is an increased 1 FTE, and the rest is offset by other savings and increased revenue.
Thank you, Executive Director. I would be really grateful, because my email has now died, if someone could read the wording from Mayor Cole's email today in relation to where her proposed amendment would be coming. Unfortunately, it has not downloaded from the server for me, so I do not have access to it in the chair here.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I can call up the Mayor's email, which was flagging a potential amendment. But in summary, the Mayor was flagging reducing the 6% employee cost overall by allowing for one additional FTE only, with 0.5 allocation towards graffiti removal and 0.5 allocation towards traffic engineering, which have been identified as a priority need, noting any remaining staffing needs are to be resourced within the existing budget allocation. That's all, Deputy Mayor.
And can I have, and is there any comments on this, or will we receive some comments when the amendment comes forward?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we can add some additional advice on that in the briefing notes and work with Mayor Cole to draft up that amendment for the OCM next Tuesday.
Thank you. I note from budget workshops and discussions that there is a proposal to increase our capacity in relation to parking compliance. And I had asked some questions through this process in relation to within the existing pool of rangers, who I believe are 17 FTE, what I guess proportion of their time, or what sort of current capacity we have within that FTE group to undertake parking compliance, and how the proposed change would impact that capacity. But I guess to start off, we need the denominator. So I'm just wondering if I can get some additional information on that.
So through you, Deputy Mayor, in terms of the denominator, do you mean is the FTE 17?
No, the current, I guess, hours per week that those 17 staff members would be able to allocate to parking compliance duties. So, because at the moment I'm presuming it, yeah.
Yeah, so Deputy Mayor, I'm just saying, sorry, I should have whispered a bit. Can't give you the information now, but I'll inquire and get something in the briefing notes.
Thank you very much. And in terms of if a 0.5 was to be allocated into the accessible city strategy implementation, what capacity there is within the existing staffing to take on some of that additional work, or if there is likely to be a external use of consultants or agency staff.
Did you want to answer that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we would have to come back and confirm what the implications would be for existing priorities within the team. There was a petition presented tonight, for instance, on Forest Street. We do get a large number of regular, high priority requests around traffic and transport and car parking. We're not currently able to respond to all the resident requests that we receive. We can provide a bit more detail on what the priority areas have been and what would be flagged for implementation in the accessible city strategy, and where we have been trying to reduce the overall spend on consultants in order to retain those skills and develop those skills internally.
Do I have any further questions on the budget? Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the Director, I just want to get some clarity on the statement that's made on page 9 of the report, and it refers to, it lists through the one resource for the accessible city strategy and the half resource to support the graffiti removal. I interpret that to be 1.5 FTE, and then lower down it references an increase of 1 FTE. Can you just provide some additional clarity on that, please?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Management's discussion was, even though there is a proposal to add 1.5 FTE, that we would find a saving of 0.5 FTE, therefore balancing out the total increase to 1 FTE and being compliant with the long-term financial plan. So in effect, resourcing that internally I suppose, in reflecting the Mayor's feedback on that.
Any further questions? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just I would like to request an amendment for the installation of a 65 kilowatt solar array at Beady Park, noting that the amendment I'm seeking is we have a business case that proposes a counterlevered shade structure in the car park. It doesn't necessarily have to be there, but that is effectively the base case. If there is an alternative location elsewhere around the site, I'm happy for it to be worded in a way to enable the flexibility to move it to an alternative location, and that it's proposed that that would be funded through a loan because of the positive business case, but there may be associated costs for the city in setting that up and organising that. And if we could include with that the details of the analysis that's been done by the city as well.
Through you, Mayor Cole, we do, through you, Deputy Mayor, we do have that detail from the proposal from Councillor Loden. So we'll draft that into amendment and work with Councillor Loden on how that's presented and circulate to Council in advance of the meeting next Tuesday.
Thank you. Do I have any further questions? Okay, so I'm just going to really clarify this because I think you said per week again, but if we have a rate on the dollar of 7.9 cents and we've got a $17,500 property, my understanding is the increase would be $32 per year on a 2.4% rating.
$32.07 per year.
Yes, you said per week twice. And I was thinking that was a lot of coffee because we'd sort of talked about this as being less than a cup of coffee a week. But anyway, so
I'm having trouble reading my own numbers today.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If there's nothing further, we'll move on.
Yeah, it's a big cup of coffee, that one. So yes, thank you. $32 per year and 62 cents per week.
I'm going to move back to the start of the agenda. Thank you. I'm still trying to get my docs on tap to work. There's so many documents. No, that's fine. I'll just wait until I can get there. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to go to item 5.2, the City of Vincent Rebound Plan Quarterly Update. Do I have any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just through you, just a couple of points and just a couple of corrections on the report on page 2. Just reference to the event known as After Dark. It was actually the Pickle District After Dark. And if we can refer to the Pickle District Town Team, when we refer to the Town Team as an entity, just to really differentiate that just from referring to the precinct, which is the Pickle District. Just also with an update on the status of any outstanding artworks that came through on the COVID-19 arts relief funding. I know it's sort of like these updates and smatterings throughout the report, so thank you for that. But it might be helpful for other councillors if we just had just a one-page summary on where we're at with those and any of the last few remaining, where if I can request that additional information through, please.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, absolutely. We can put that in the report itself.
Any further questions? Councillor Hallett.
Just in relation to the our relaxing, and I guess also the interface with the state governments relaxing around change of use within the state of emergency, etc. Do we, given that they're not having to apply for it, do we still have any records of, I guess, what changes might have happened over the period?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll try and keep my voice. It's disappearing slowly. We have a record of, under those conditions associated with the exemptions, all new developments need to advise the city before they commence that use or that development. So we have a record of all of the ones that have complied with the requirements of the exemptions, yes. It's not to say that there aren't other businesses out there that have started without approval, but that happens whether the exemptions are in place or not, obviously, from time to time. So.
Any further questions? Okay, item 5.3, Arts Rebound Town Centre Artworks. Councillor Hallett.
Just wanted to say I appreciate the comments the author of this report has included in the sustainability and public health implications, and to make it a question, is it possible for other reports to consider that approach?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, we can circulate to report writers the type of language and the thought and consideration of that section of the report as a model in the future.
Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you. Through you to the manager. Yep. I just want to get some clarity on the comment there, which referring to the total amount for the cash in lieu reserve. So it says since the inception of the COVID-19 Arts Relief Project, the 151,373 has been committed, and the 400,243 currently remains uncommitted. But I just refer back to the special council meeting back in March last year, where the council approval was the use of 500,000 and the percent for art, and whether we need to be very clear about what amounts that we're actually approving here under that, as to whether, I suppose now that the COVID-19 Arts Relief Working Group and the committee have now ceased, but whether we still need to be quite accurate in how we refer back to that, either that 500 which council approved, or it now is the 540.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I believe that the change in the figures is due to the amount that we now have in the fund. So we're now referring to how much we have left. Some of those pieces that we have spent the money on, of those 16 pieces, ended up being a slightly different cost to what we initially thought. So that we are now referring to what remains uncommitted. What we say is what is remaining in that fund to use on this project itself.
So I suppose just my question is whether we need to be clear about whether it's the uncommitted funds or whether it's money that actually is now within that reserve, as to how we, I suppose, that language of how we treat that amount. It's just being sort of my understanding, but also the community's understanding is how much money is sitting within that reserve.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we can include in the briefing notes what we are referring to when we say uncommitted, and what that really means for the amount in the reserve and what is left to spend.
Thank you. Anything further? No, we'll move on to item 5.4, Built Form Policy Amendment 3. Questions, please. Nope. Okie dokie. Let's move on to item 5.5, Britannia Reserve Development Plan. Do I have any questions? Councillor Toppelberg.
Can we just get some clarity around so I understand what's there is a concept design, but can we get some clarity around the selection process for the architect for the project?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we have utilised our members of our design review panel for this work, as their knowledge of the area and their expertise. They were those on the panel that were best fit for this project.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, can I just clarify, there's a concept plan for the Britannia Reserve site, and then there's a draft design for the change rooms, which is two. Could we just clarify
the change rooms? Okay, the change rooms in particular.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I understand the answer was referring to the change rooms as well.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the answer is referring to the concept, the change room design done by Design Right is not through the design review panel.
So can I get an understanding of the selection process as to how that came about? Was it an EOI? Was it public submission? How did we find the architect that was selected?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice. I mean, we did a procurement to select them, and it is a concept, so it's not necessarily the final design.
Thank you. And the questions, so the issues that had been raised with Florida Athena, in some of the discussions, or I was present at one of them, that related to cover of seating. Can we get an explanation of how that's, because as it's presented in the concept plan, these seats are presented as uncovered. Can we get some clarity also on whether, if covering these seats now or in the future, would impact on the visibility of the pitch from the seating that exists in front of the Florida Athena club rooms?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we've had subsequent meetings on site to talk about the shade and where that was best placed. And the club, with their knowledge of the site, felt that the seating in front of the change rooms was not the best site for this, but perhaps that could be investigated in front of the club rooms instead, also identifying that issue with sight lines as well.
So in terms of future proofing, in the event that we see soccer become a summer sport, which is possible, it's happened previously due to Olympics or other things. So in the event that it's inhospitable to be sitting on, as you face it, the left-hand side going forward, am I correct that any shade or any shade structure or roof structure that's placed above that seating would restrict viewing of the pitch from the seating that exists in front of the club rooms?
The Deputy Mayor, not all shade would create a barrier. It would have to be, there are some designs that I believe would be feasible.
Thank you very much. And can just get an understanding, so the process from here, in the event that this is approved that the concept is approved next week, it goes out to consultation. Can I get an understanding of the proposed procurement process for the works itself? Would it be, I'm presuming, whilst the grant is intended to be issued to the city, that the club would seek to have some level of control over the work to its rooms, but can we just get an understanding of what the intent is for the actual process of build going forward in the event that it is some version of this is the result of community consultation, is that it's supported by council and the grant is forthcoming? Give some idea of what that process would be, please.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we would see that requiring to go through the city's procurement process.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a follow-up question from Councillor Toppelbergs. I'm just interested if you could outline the process if this is approved next week. At what point do we anticipate that the $3 million grant would be confirmed, and how that process would work, and also the same in relation to the LRCI grant?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the $3 million grant, the process for that would be that we would go out for community consultation. We would write a letter to the government to inform them of that and what our next steps are. We would then also write them a letter letting them know of the results of community consultation and that we will go into council following endorsement of the plan itself and a written approval from Florida Athena Football Club that they were also in alignment and in approval of the plan that we put forward. We believe that that is when we would be able to receive the $3 million grant funding. In regards to the funding for the lighting, that simply requires for the works to be completed within the time frame itself.
So you don't consider that we would need detailed design to secure the $3 million, or is the concept plan enough, or the next step?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, apologies, detailed design is required.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just to clarify on the floodlighting grant, that does need to be on an accelerated timeframe compared to the potential $3 million grant, which isn't time limited at this stage. So we were intending to consult the community earlier on the proposal for an upgrade to floodlighting in order to ensure that we can meet the deadline from the federal government to have the works completed by the end of this calendar year. The $3 million grant isn't time limited in the same way.
So on that basis, are you not proposing to consult on both pieces of work at the same time?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So that the consultation on the lights is being prepared now. And we're moving forward that as quick as we can because of that tight timescale. So there will be a slightly separate, but both consultations will refer to the other one, if that makes sense. It's just that we need to move so quickly to get the lights on the ground by December that we're moving forward with that right now.
So will there be overlap though, or will we be asking people to give their opinion on the lights without knowledge of what else is being proposed for the site?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Well, they will have knowledge because we'll refer to it as part, as I said, separate consultations, but refer to the other consultation about, and they are, I mean, one is to do with Litter Stadium and one is to do with Britannia Reserve. So there is a kind of physical separation as well, but each one will refer to the other one, if that makes sense.
Anything for that? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. I'm not going to be here next week, so I'm going to ask for this in advance of what comes back as a result of the consultation, assuming this is approved to go out to consultation, just so that it's been asked for. But just some commentary and some more detail around landscaping opportunities and whether it's an ESD report or the sustainability aspects of the design. I know we spoke about the orientation of the roof being effectively southeast, which is the opposite to where you would place solar panels, which means that if that was to be desired in the future, it would change the aesthetic of the building. So those sorts of things, but also the access to shade generally, the landscaping aspect of it. If you look at the three views that are presented, 1, 2 and 3 on page 417. And also, I think it would be, and it'll be assuming part of detailed design, but also getting an understanding, and particularly on the shoulder ends of the season where the heat is extreme, how comfortable or possible it would be to sit on those seats fully exposed, because some materials may well make it impossible to actually sit on those seats as depending on what they're made from. So I think that's a critical part of the detailed design, but I'd like to see that come back in the consultation report, if that's possible, please.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, absolutely. Yeah, we'll include some comments to seek feedback on those elements as well.
Councillor Vatakis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question just with regards to the report refers to the relocation of the Optus Tower. So just want some understanding at what stage we are with negotiations on that, possible lease, and when that would be foreseen to come back to council at minimum with some form of advice as to what that lease would be.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we have two representatives from Optus here tonight, and we are going to arrange a separate meeting with interested councillors about that issue around telecommunications infrastructure in Mount Hawthorn. There is a current site at the corner of Brady and Linton Street, if I get that corner right, which has the current Optus and Telstra infrastructure on, which is a state government-owned DFES site. We understand that site is going to be put up for sale, so the infrastructure does need to be relocated. We have known about this for some time and have been in discussions with Optus about where the best alternative site could be, and we haven't fixed a view on that. but it's likely in order to ensure that the network remains stable and sufficient for coverage in Mountain Hawthorn, it's likely to be in the area of Britannia Reserve. We have not fixed a view on where exactly that should be, but we've indicated a particular area as close as possible to the freeway, preferably elevated, and aimed at ensuring the least visual impact, where it could be shielded by existing mature trees. But there are different options on where that could be, including the fact that there is a related item here we've already discussed about light poles being placed on Britannia Reserve. So there is a potential to reduce the number of poles by attaching both mobile telecommunications infrastructure and floodlighting onto a single pole. But all those options are still up for discussion. We would just like to be able to identify the potential most suitable location in the first instance. Once that location has some broad agreement, then there'd be a separate discretionary decision of council if there was any lease agreement for a particular piece of city land, and then there'd be a development application process following that. So we are really at the earliest stages of identifying potentially suitable locations, and we'll engage with council in detail with Optus, who would be in a sharing arrangement with Telstra and potentially Vodafone as well. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just so my understanding, that will require a DA to come back for approval through to council.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, in the first instance, it may involve a discretionary decision of council for a potential lease of a small area of land for the tower. So the lease discussion would precede any development application. So yes, both the first stage would be location decision, second would be a lease agreement, third would be a development application.
And so my understanding is that we have a couple of towers within the city of Vincent, one in particular which has been quite controversial in North Perth with regards to the height and intensification of that site over a number of years. So just so I understand, at what stage will the community and council have some input into the nature of that tower and really the size and intensity if we're talking about in that particular location?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we will be arranging a separate meeting with interested councillors with representatives from Optus to discuss that, including on how to go about engaging with residents who have an interest in the tower, whether it's a tower structure, what it may look like or how it could be configured, and any other concerns they may have about mobile telecommunications coverage in Mount Hawthorn.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Can we ensure that in that consideration that the distance, as the bird crow flies, between Arranmore Primary School and the proposed location is known? Because I think last time we had a proposal come before us somewhere within Mount Hawthorn, there was just differing views on the legislation and the proximity to the school. So if we can make sure that before that does, when that does come, that we're clear on that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, we can provide that information.
Councillor Vatakis.
Just on a separate note, that you're noting that the DFIS site may come up for sale. Can we actually put the idea through the state government that it might be one site that they might consider for affordable housing?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we haven't been in direct contact with DFES on the plans for that site, but we can approach them following that suggestion, yes.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Has the concept design been put through, for the change room, been put through the design review panel? Is that form part of the process?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, no, due to timing it has not, but we will definitely be consulting with them through the community consultation.
So are we, to get the grant, we're proceeding with this concept to detailed design and then to the grant funding? Like, do we have any further opportunity to review this concept? Or does the council have any further opportunity to review or change this concept if it is approved next week? The item?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we're just seeking approval for to go out to community consultation. Following that, we'll make any changes to the concept and then we will have that approved to go to detailed design.
Councillors? No. Okay. Moving on to infrastructure and environment, item 6.1, e-permits implementation progress report. Do you have any questions? I just have one question. I note that there's been, I think it was 78% of people that previously had a permit have now registered for an account. One of the, I guess, purposes of this report was in relation to where people had raised issues with the there may be a barrier to access. And just wondering if there have been, since the previous reporting period, if there has been any of those concerns raised with administration and how administration have assisted those people to address those concerns.
Deputy Mayor, there haven't been any further inquiries. I mean, we are really getting to the point now where we're thinking that the people who have not registered are not entitled to the permits for all the reasons we've talked about in the past. So we are getting to the point of that conclusion. So yeah, but no residents have approached us with issues that we've had to help.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 6.2 we've covered. Item 7.1, Leederville Gardens Trust Fund, COVID-19 relief grants update. Do you have any questions? Councillor Vatakis.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. It's just with regards to the rent moratorium. There was reference on page 3 of the report on expected the end of the rent moratorium could result in an increase in need. Now, the rent moratorium was at the end of March, so I just want to get an understanding as to what impact has been seen in the last 2 months on that particular item.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. I think I'll come back with a response on that and get the latest information.
Anything further? No. Sorry about that. Now we'll move on to item 7.2, management agreement for the Vincent Tool Library on a portion of Britannia Reserve. Councillor Loden.
Just wanted to inquire if we've communicated with the membership around there's a fee associated with this, but it's being waived in this case, but that there'll be a conversation when that lease is up for renewal around those fees and if they're aware of the quantum of the fees associated.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, that's my understanding is they are aware of these fees, that they're aware that this report's coming through and what it contains.
And the second one was just around they're obtaining a 50% discount because of the community benefits and how that process works and what things they can do to improve the discount that they would receive between now and when their lease is renewed. Is that been discussed with them? Yeah,
through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll get more specifics about what actions they could take to increase that rebate. But it tends to link to the degree of community benefit, who are the beneficiaries of that service and how directly it relates to City of Vincent residents in particular. But I'll verify how the 50% was made up and where there might be other opportunities.
Anything further, Councillor Hallett?
Just if you can comment briefly on the timeline for the Britannia Reserve Development Plan, if that was approved, how that would impact on the availability of the premises in the future beyond the 6 months.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the development plan doesn't highlight or recommend any other alternative use for that, the heritage turnstile building. So there wouldn't be any immediate impact unless council decided that there should be an alternative use sometime in the future. So where administration's relatively comfortable with that being an ongoing arrangement unless council makes a decision otherwise.
Sorry, any further questions? I'm just trying to see if I've got one from Councillor Smith. Missed it. Cool. Any further questions? Thanks, Councillor Smith. I've just got a nope, I'm all good from Councillor Smith. Okay. Item 7.3, support for Uluru Statement from the Heart. Do I have any questions? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just when this came to the RAP working group, there was some concerns flagged about that we were invited by the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Ken Wyatt, to participate in the Indigenous Voice consultation that was ongoing. My understanding was that the date that we received the letter was after it closed. So I just was hoping to get some comments on that.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, that's correct. The letter was signed 29th of April, and I think it was received in our office on the 30th. And when we followed the link to the consultation, it had already closed. So unfortunately, by the time we referred it to our RAP working group, it had well and truly passed its deadline.
Did the city have any follow-up conversations with the Minister's office about that and ways that the city might be able to participate in the future?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, not to my knowledge. I think we just acknowledged the fact that on that particular item that we had missed the due date.
Is there a way that we could get in touch and just bring them up and find out what the next step is and how we can be maybe added onto the list? Is that possible?
Yep. Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's absolutely possible.
Anything further on this item? No. Okay, item 7.4, investment report, is at 30 April 2021. Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Apologies if I've missed it, but can we get, am I correct that we're no longer getting a report on the value of our share portfolio?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I think I'll get the finance team to respond to that.
Just for clarity, we do own, I think 11,000, we did own 11,000 shares in Bendigo Bank. It used to appear on the investment report and I just noticed that it wasn't there.
It's not there.
I'd love to see how it's going in this terrific bull market that we're experiencing.
Yeah. Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll check on that $11,000. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Any further questions on the investment report? No, I'll move on to item 7.5, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1 April to 30 April 2021. Councillor Hallett.
So there was a couple of payments related to the Pride mural concepts and just wondering if we can get an update on where that's at.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, I'm not managing that issue at the moment. So do you have a latest or should we come back on the briefing notes, I think?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I think Councillor Fotakis knows the answer to that question because the mural's been installed on 4 View Street. Is that right, Councillor Fotakis?
Yeah, so the mural's being installed at 4 View Street, which is leased to Pride WA and Rainbow Community. Been very effective. The artist that has been chosen for that did have an art exhibition that was launched a couple of weeks ago and it is anticipated for this month. So that was the last report that I had on that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I've got a nice photo I'll circulate to council members.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Just in relation to where we have arrangements, so I'm looking on page, my computer doesn't want to show me what page it's on. So I'm just going to tell you it's in the Ks.
In the Ks, yeah.
In the Ks. So the parking revenue distribution for 375 William Street, so where we have those sorts of arrangements, can we just update it so it tells us whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually, etc. So the 35,000, just so we get an understanding of how frequent those payments are, that would be great. Thank you.
So, Deputy Mayor, if I can just confirm it's about the frequency of those payments?
Correct. So I understand the agreement and the percentage sharing arrangement, but not sure whether that payout is monthly, weekly, annually, etc.
Great.
Any further questions? I had one bit random. Just wondered for the marquee hire for the native plant sale morning. Just wondering how many marquees we got for 2.6K. Felt a little high.
Yep. I will confirm that in the briefing notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Topelberg.
Sorry, one more, just so that it doesn't come back to bite anyone. The elected members were this month included in their sitting fees. It also included the ICT allowance, but it's been shown only as ICT allowance. So, for example, Mayor Cole is shown as $9,125 for 50% of the ICT allowance. I'm sure that at some point people would not like that to be a record of what actually occurred. So if we can have that amended, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I can fix that.
Next item is the financial statements as at 30 April 2021. Do I have any questions? No. We have asked our questions on item 7.7. Now we move on to item 8.1, results of consultation, Barley Street car park options for future use. Questions? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just looking for a bit of clarity on what the recommendation proposes to be done with the proceeds of a sale should it go ahead. There's item recommendation number 6 notes that it would be held in the public open space reserve, but the report refers to not making any decisions as yet. And there's also quite a bit of discussion about projects that could happen in Beaufort Street. So I'm just wondering, if it is held in the public open space reserve, does that preclude those, for example, pedestrian crossings being, the funds being used for that, or I'm just wondering if you can clarify what you're proposing.
Through Deputy Mayor, no, it doesn't preclude the funds from being used for that. While it is in the reserve, it would, but the money can be transferred if council makes a decision to use those funds for an alternative purpose. So throughout the report, I think we did refer, like you said, to not making a decision. So that was the intention of that recommendation, that it be held in the reserve, and then a later decision can be made, whether it's public open space or if it's for more of a hard infrastructure, it could be moved to an alternative reserve.
So is then the purpose of placing it into the reserve simply just to earmark it so it doesn't get absorbed into general operating funds?
Through the Deputy Mayor, yes, that's correct. And it's also to satisfy that requirement of the public open space strategy for the sale of land to be held in reserve.
Councillor Topelberg.
Thank you. I'm not going to be here next week, but I will put forth an amendment. If anyone wishes to move it, they can. But it would be to just flagging to delete item 8. Item 8, I think, deals with a potential result of the sale and is a matter to be dealt with, which effectively, as presented, would give the CEO the ability to go back to square one, which is against the intent of the recommendation, because it says that it would continue negotiation on the transition plan in attachment 4. So my understanding is that if it was to go to sale, there will be parameters set by council as to what they would or would not accept. If that isn't achieved, to me, that would then result in another council decision. So just flagging that I would be happy if item 8 was removed, and the way to do that is to amend it. Even though I shall not be here, I shall put it in writing before I depart.
Any further questions? Councillor Topelberg.
Sorry, so are we the acting manager of governance? Okay, thank you, Jordan. That'll be easier. If we can just get some comments. So my understanding is that is correct. That the proceeds of the sale of land within the city can go or have to go into the POS reserve. Because I guess the question is that the nexus between the long-term financial plan shortfalls identified in the city, what elevates the POS over and above any other financial need of the city. I understand there was an identification of potentially POS placement based on the strategic opportunities of the road reserve existing adjacent or not adjacent, but potentially adjacent to a city-owned lot, given that the sale of land would have nothing to do with that road reserve and its potential use as POS. What is the nexus between that money having to go there as opposed to being reinvested in any of the other city's financial obligations or in Beaufort Street parking infrastructure or otherwise?
Through the Deputy Mayor, so technically the sale of land, if council chooses to sell the land, the money from it can be used for any purpose. The public open space strategy has in there an action that from the sale of land, we should use that money to upgrade or acquire more public open space. Administration, since that's a position of the council, administration have stuck to that in our recommendation, but it's up to the council if they don't choose to follow that part of the strategy and instead want to use the money either for a different item in the area or in a completely different area. Yeah, it's totally up to council.
But as this recommendation is presented, and I know there's other decision points along the way, but in the event that the sale of the land was to proceed, the decision on this doesn't bind, there still needs to be a decision at that point of what those funds need to go to. And in a literal sense, prior to the funds being transferred, it would require a decision to be made by council as to where those funds go. Otherwise, it would end up in the municipal funds. Is that correct?
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, that's right. So the expenditure is not shown in the budget anywhere, not for next year. And so for the year after that, if the sale occurs in this financial year, for the year after that or through the mid-year review, that money can be allocated.
And just in the briefing notes, it doesn't really need to be in the briefing notes. I guess, given the understanding or the citing of the 300 local business owners and the fact that administration has seen those businesses, I understand the person who presented it said that would be confidential, but the decision, can just get some comments around the conscious decision to treat that as one submission. Statistically, I understand, well, statistically it's actually the other way, but I understand the confidentiality aspect. But in terms of presenting statistics and acknowledging that up to 300 local interested parties have made a submission that's being treated as one statistically, kind of makes the table on page 533 questionable in terms of its relevance to the commentary. If we can perhaps get an idea of some of, not just the signatories to it, but what the feeling is of local business in relation to the value of car parking in the area. I understand the issue with this particular lot and the dollars around it, but the value of the local government and the sense of need or obligation for the local government to either supply reasonable car parking or to ensure that land uses are such that it encourages the private sector to supply it. I think that's, I don't know if it's contained, if it was just signatories or if that feedback has been garnered, but I guess the distillation of the efforts that the person who gained those signatures went to be distilled into a representation of one statistically in the table is not in line with the intent of their consultation or ours. Isn't it? There you go, there's a question.
So, dear Deputy Mayor, could we just get clarification of the question?
So if we can get, so the question is whether, can the briefing notes include some commentary around the actual sentiment of local business, not just the representation as one statistically in the table?
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, you can provide that. I'll just also note that the petition, so yeah, I acknowledge that the table doesn't really reflect it. So I did try to explain that a bit further in that paragraph, but just noting that the petition or the poll that was provided, not just that it was confidential, but it only provided the option of, or it essentially said that the council was looking to get rid of the car park. Do you want this to happen or not? So it didn't provide the other, well, it provided the option of essentially just selling the land, but not about the land swap. So we didn't really get that prioritisation that we got through our Imagine Vincent process. So we can try to liaise with some of the businesses in the area about that, but definitely, as you would know, local businesses do greatly value car parking in the area, and that's demonstrated through this.
Sure, and I guess just for clarity, option 2, which was the land swap, would result in the car park not being there either in the long, so either way it's represented, the car park is no longer, the end result is perceived to be the same. But yeah, if we can just get some more understanding of what the results of the feedback were from the consultation in relation to business sentiment and car parking availability and land uses in the area, please.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've just got a request from Councillor Smith to flag an amendment for next week, following on from the previous discussion, that, if I've understood it correctly, to reword item 6 so that the money would be held in public open space reserve to create or enhance POS within in the vicinity of Beaufort Street. I'll let her clarify the exact wording she's imagining.
Any further questions? Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just through you, just on that amendment, can that also include some commentary on the implications of that being site-specific and what that means for other potential land sales in other precincts, in denoting the money towards a particular precinct as opposed to a strategy?
Councillor Loden.
And on the same topic, could we get some details on where is the current greatest shortfall in public open space within the city too?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, we can do both. As a general principle, we wouldn't automatically want to draw the smallest geographic nexus between sale of one piece of land anywhere within the city to investing in any public infrastructural works in another part of the city. That should be done by a whole of City of Vincent prioritisation process by council through the annual budget process, through the public open space strategy and through master planning for the city.
Questions? Okay, so could I get some further information on the other car parks in the vicinity? I note there's 138 bays currently within Raglan Road and Chelmsford Road, but I always forget which one it is, that there is a lease over portion of one of the other car parks, so they are not necessarily straightforward for the city to develop further or reconfigure. So I guess two things, just if I could get a map or something showing the lease area, and also if I could get some commentary on the availability of land in other car parks for reconfiguration or redevelopment, noting that I believe our Raglan Road car park was, actually both of them have been sort of fairly recently done, but the Raglan Road was done 2 years ago, was it? I think. Anyway, the item that talks to a report coming forward in relation to consideration of potential, I guess, shared space or open space at and other areas within Beaufort Street, either on the road reserve at Grosvenor Road or Barley Street. What's the timeline proposed for that work?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice and check with the policy in place team.
Thank you. The current proposal, should a land sale proceed, would one would presume would require the relocation or removal of the Beaufort Street sign. I can't recall if portion of the sign is on the Vincent site. I'm getting a nod. It is. Is the portion of the sign on the Vincent land, or is it solely on the other lots?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, yes, I think the sign is fully on. Oh, sorry. Yes, there's a portion on our actual strip, but none of it's in the road reserve itself. So it's all set into the properties.
Yes, correct. Okay, I understand that now. I think we've got the T or something. So if there is, should things proceed as is proposed, and the land is sold, I believe the report talks to, the potential for investigating whether the sign could be relocated or removed. Can I get some additional information on that? And if it's not something that's able to be considered between this week and next, when that work will be done, and if there is, I guess, the intention that that work would be resourced within this year's budget. And then a follow-up question is, and I'm presuming the answer is no, but if I could just get some confirmation, there is no budget currently proposed for the 21-22 financial year for the relocation of that sign. That's correct, yeah?
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, that's correct. On the first part, I guess our primary intention would be to try to negotiate with the owners of the other two properties during their development to see if we can retain it on their land. But following that, that would be months away still. But following that, that's when we would have to seriously start looking at what our other options are.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the manager did have an idea that the future of that sign could be negotiated as part of any percent for art contribution that a mixed-use development could make to that site.
Okay, thank you. The Accessible City Strategy, funded with a reasonable proportion, funded through cash in lieu contributions. Just if I could get some commentary on the elements within the Accessible City Strategy that may be applicable to Beaufort Street, and also to, I guess, the issues that have been raised by the community in the consultation. I do note that there is, within the draft place plan, there is, it's already been flagged around undertaking some work around improving the pedestrianisation of Beaufort Street. So should that be adopted, I understand that that would occur within 21-22 financial year, but if there's anything broader within the Accessible City Strategy that would be relevant here, I'd be grateful for that commentary here or in the briefing notes.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I'll provide that in the briefing notes.
I think that's it. Oh, and I note that one thing I did note when the draft capital works program related to, I believe, the Beaufort Street light poles and verge is in 22-23. Is that correct? Not 21-22.
Deputy Mayor, that's a tough question. I'll need to check that and take it on notice. Sorry.
Thank you. I thought it was next year as well. Okay, be grateful for confirmation. I don't have anything further. Councillor Castle.
Sorry, I have one quick last one. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hallett's comment earlier tonight reminded me that now that we're seeing wording around sustainability implications and public health implications, in an item like this, the comment is, this is not in keeping with any of the priority health outcomes. That I find that wording a bit confusing. Does that mean it's contrary to those outcomes, or that it is just not, has no impact on them? And just flagging that perhaps we can settle on some clearer wording in that regard.
Yes, through Deputy Mayor, I can clarify that in the report to Council.
Any further questions? No. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.2, repeal of Local Government Property Local Law 2008 and approval to advertise Local Government Property Law 2021. Do I have any questions? I do not.
Sorry.
Councillor Fataka, sorry about that.
Bit slow, sorry, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to look at the modified penalties that are on page 71 and 72. What actually determines those amount? Are they sort of set by sort of some sort of framework, or we determine that as a local government independent of other fees?
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, there's no minimum amount. We're just bound by a maximum. And so I think for a few of those, we've pushed them up to the maximum. And the maximum is set at 10% of what a court could impose for the same crime.
So that doesn't limit someone being taken through on the legal proceedings to court and actually being fined, or the court actually fine them a superior amount?
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, that's right. That would be through a prosecution rather than this, which would be an on-the-spot fine.
Any further questions? I had one in relation to the removal of provisions in relation to animals, and I just wasn't sure if this related to our, development of new animal local law as a freestanding document. If you could remind me, that would be great.
Through Deputy Mayor, yes, that's correct. I could provide some further specificity, if you like, in the briefing notes.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you. Nothing further. Okay. I'm now moving on to the outcome of advertising and adoption of the new fraud, corruption and prevention policy, item 8.3. Do I have any questions on this item? No questions. Let's try for item 8.4, governance framework, proposed updates and proposed repeal of council member and employee business dealings policy. Councillor Toppelberg.
Just flagging that I probably should have declared an interest in this matter, as I think my business is the only one that actually has ever appeared on here. So that related to a specific circumstance, but I won't be here to vote or participate in the debate and would not be seeking otherwise. But I shall remove myself from the chamber, but I will put in a declaration because I currently sit on the register. So.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I mean, just to comment that all council members are obliged by the policy to participate in it. The fact that a council member uses a register which it's obliged to participate in wouldn't necessarily mean that you have to leave the room, but Councillor Toppelberg has left the room, so I'll stop talking.
Does anyone have any questions on this item? No? No questions. Councillor Toppelberg may return.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just to make the comment that when the one registration we did have on that register from Councillor Toppelberg 18 months, 2 years ago was put on, we couldn't find any other inclusion in that. So it was the only one we've had for the better part of 10 years since we've had that policy. So that was part of the recommendation that it was no longer needed.
Thank you, CEO. We'll move on to item 8.5, the annual review of council delegations. Questions? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. As alluded to in the discussion on item 5.1, am I correct then that if council approves a small bar, the number of patrons, that under this proposed change that an amendment to the number of patrons would be able to be considered under delegation? Was that the intimation made earlier?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, if you were seeking to modify or increase the number of patrons, then that would impact one of the conditions imposed, and ultimately that would need to come back through council.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, if I can just add on, even though under delegation improvements have been made to the heritage place, because it is heritage listed, and that's under the current delegations, one of the changes relating to heritage, so I'll just draw your attention to item number 6, in the council conditions on the delegation, it's been proposed to extend the amount of heritage that council would be dealing with in future. Specifically, alterations and additions to heritage places would need to come through to council unless they were relatively minor. So whether it's restoration works or what we refer to as external fixtures, which relate to sustainability initiatives. Those minor improvements could be dealt with under delegation, but ordinarily the proposal tonight, for example, would have had to come through to council, and the operator wouldn't have had that approval under delegation to commence building works on the restaurant and shop component.
Can I ask then in relation to that, because the statutory timelines still apply, how long from their submission of DA until they receive their approval under delegation? How you can provide it through the briefing notes, but be interested to know, and also if you can confirm that the applicant was advised to effectively split the DA between the component that could be dealt with under delegation, or it would be split. I'd be interested in the statutory timeframes because my understanding, but if we can get that information, that would be great.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can you please clarify the difference, if any, of the definition of a centre zone compared with the town centre? Is that just state government's exemption definition versus our terminology? And therefore, in this proposal to remove small bar, how would that affect small bars outside of the town centre or outside of the centre zone, perhaps?
Through Deputy Mayor, under the planning reforms, under the planning regulations, it simply refers to centre as the zoning. Under the city's planning scheme, there's a couple of different types of zones. So there's the local centre, as well as district centre and regional centre. So we've made a distinction between those. So that's the differentiation in terms of the centre terminology. In terms of the exemptions and how they would apply to the Vincent context, ultimately for that centre setting, it's a D use, so discretionary use, where it is in a district or regional centre, okay, which means that as long as it didn't adjoin a residential zone, so if we're talking about, for example, the heart of Leederville, it would be exempt, a small bar, but in all other zones in our district, it is an A use, so therefore the exemption under the planning regulations don't extend to an A use, so a DA would still be required. So if we refer again to the item on the agenda tonight, that was a mixed use zone, therefore a DA would still be required.
And so under this proposal, that item that we're looking at this month would be able to be approved under delegated authority, because it would still require DA, but this would change the authority to do that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, if we're using that as an example, yes, in terms of the use, but again, I refer to the heritage discussion.
Any further questions? I'm going to just ask, and if I can just confirm in relation to new condition 12 around the proposed amendments to delegation 16.1.1, can I just, the notes in the document just talk to that this clarifies the development on city-owned or managed land that should be determined by council, and it, I think I've asked this before, so I'm very sorry. Can I get the answer? In relation to structures being an awning, veranda or similar, structures for ground anchors and encroachments. And if I could just get some information on what provisions would be used to determine applications for those things if they're not coming towards council.
To you, Deputy Mayor, Ultimately, this has been included in this year's delegation review, and it really stems on from, and it's alluded to, the Minister for Land's authorisations. So basically that sets out minor encroachments from the Minister for Lands that local government would be able to sign off on for Crown land, permanent works. And in terms of awning, veranda or similar, as per the Minister for Land's authorisations, that's defined specifically in the building regulations. In terms of ground anchor, that is not related to alfresco blinds, not in that sense. It is a construction methodology to basically anchor in when you're doing deep excavation and such, hold things into place. So it's really a construction method, and that's considered under the Minister for Land's authorisations as a minor encroachment. So it's not to do with the alfresco blinds.
Yeah, and just to elaborate through Deputy Mayor, often these structures go outside the boundary of the lot, into the road reserve, into the adjoining lot, and that's where the issue's created. It's a common practice for those ground anchors to go underground and across the lot, and occasionally architectural features cross the boundary into the road reserve on the upper floors, and so that's where this comes from. The guiding documents that we would be using to assess these is the built form policy, and we'd need to be assessing the architectural features against that. You know, the setbacks wouldn't comply, and there'd be a set of discretionary principles to assess it against. And this is common practice, and we get these applications a few times a year for ground anchors that go under the ground into the road reserve, and architectural features that do the same thing on upper floors.
And in relation to awnings, verandas or similar, can you sort of talk to me about the circumstances where an application might come forward in relation to a permanent structure of that nature?
Yeah, so through Deputy Mayor, the awnings is a common one. You see those everywhere in the road reserves and our town centres. Verandas are far less common. And I must say, I've only ever seen one in all of my time in planning, and that is the old Flying Scotsman building, which was an existing one that was seeking an extension of time for a time limited approval that existed for that site. So I can't really refer to any of those except that one. But awnings are obviously common; they are everywhere, and they occasionally need approval.
Can I just ask? Is an awning has no poles and a veranda has turn posts, etc. Right? Okay. So if okay, I think I've got enough information. I'll think on it. I'm still
so through you, Deputy Mayor, the verandas don't necessarily need to have structural beams in the actual road reserve. The awnings are required to be cantilevered. The verandas, like I said, there's only one that doesn't. It's not cantilevered. I can't point to any others. But awnings are certainly a common practice. They're all cantilevered, and yeah, they occur everywhere. So and without issue for a long period of time. Verandas is another question, and it's certainly worth. And we will, I think, look at that over the next few days, and maybe put some comments in the briefing notes about whether that's warranted or not. We've simply used the exemptions, but we probably need to apply some more thought to that in the context of verandas.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Anyone else? No? Okay. Information bulletin, item 8.6. Do I have any questions? Councillor Howard.
Just wondering, and fine for the briefing notes, if we can get some more info about the rather large number of dead trees identified on the 29th of October.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll put that on the briefing notes.
Any further questions in relation to the information bulletin? There being no motions of which previous notice have been given, no items in relation to, do we need to raise, no, we don't. Item, I believe, didn't Mayor Crowell send through something about MRC?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I can flag a late item that has been requested by Mayor Cole, who is the city's representative on the Mindarie Regional Council. Mayor Cole has asked for us to prepare a report to seek a new City of Vincent representative for the next term. The Mayor's term expires at the end of this month. So it would help us, it would assist administration if there was some interest shown prior to the meeting and we could, there is some interest shown by Councillor Castle, Deputy Mayor, but if there was any other interest from other members to discuss what that role meant and the commitment and the background. But if there's only one, then that's easier for us to prepare that report.
No, Councillor Toppelberg tends to raise something at times like this to request someone else put their name forward for some sort of election to occur. Is that what you guys are discussing? Great.
There's a shoebox with a slit cut in the top of it that I think has been used once in the last 12 years.
Thank you, Councillor Castle, for putting your name forward. That being all, I don't believe there's anything to discuss, and I will close the briefing session at 8:16 p.m. Thank you very much for tuning in.